Hi, Maud. How are you doing? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing but there we on this beautiful, well, it's not beautiful, it's really great. On this could be more beautiful Thursday. Hey, I would love to see your beautiful faces. If you're not feeling too shy, do feel free to put your camera on. I'm not asking to see your background, I just want to see your eyebrows and make sure to see if you understand something or not. Is everyone feeling shy? Oh, thank you. Thank you, Simra. Perfect. Now, ooh, Evelina, could I ask you to put your mic off? Thank you. All right, let's get going. My name is Roxanne. You can see where I've been, what I've been studying on the floor. Holy crap, it's been 2 seconds. On the screen, I just want to warn, it's going to be an hour and a half of me fighting PowerPoint, fighting Zoom. We're not friends, and they remind me every single time I have one of the sessions. It's going to be fun. This is the QR code for the WhatsApp group. I can bring it back during the break if you haven't had a chance to scan this now. So this is where after today, you can ask further questions about the material, about the slides, and the slides will be given a bit later on as well today, not on the group though. I believe it's either emailed to you or sent to you in another way. As a recap, for the cultural psychology exam, we got 12 modules. We will have, for the exam, you have 50 multiple choice questions. And then to pass quick math, you need 34 correct questions. What are we doing to do today about that? Today, out of those 12 modules on the screen, we will be looking at the two that proved to be the most requested on the poll that I put on the year two WhatsApp group, which is module 5 and module 6. So it's roughly 18% of the course. And while, yes, I am here to guide you through the theory, if the theory is not clear, I'm mostly here to guide you through the exam questions that have been put together for this training course, to see the logic in the question, to see the logic or the absence of logic in the answers, and guiding you to get to the correct answer. But that also, of course, involves going through theory. So how we're going to proceed today is that through the two modules, we will have an exam question first without the answer for you to reflect on. No need to send me the answer. We'll go through theory and then we'll go back to the question. Thank you, Maud, for the camera. Thank you very much. Ooh, love the wall decor. Very nice. And then we'll do the same, and then we'll come back to the exam question, this time going through the answers and discuss what answer is what and how we get to the correct answer. And same for module 6. Because it is a very text-based course, there's a lot to take in, and so I've tried to put some order into what you guys need to look out for. So in these slides, what is underlined is simply the title or a subtitle in the module. Anything in bold is important. Anything in a cute little purple box is for you to remember. And because I like stickers, anything additional in the stickers. And then I'll check on with you from time to time about how we are feelings. Are we ready to get started? Yeah. Oh, the dread. That's all right. Let's go. Module 5. Coming to the something I forgot to say, how to interact with me with the group today. Please, if you have a question that you want to use your mic, raise your hand first, and then I'll give the mic to you. If you have a question that you want to put in the chat, If it's about the content, if it's about the exam question, if it's anything about the session, please put it in the general chat. But when you answer the exam question, do yourself a favor, send it to me so that I see what you have to say. Goodie? Oh yeah, strong nod. Let's go. Practice question for Module 5. Which study analyzed the effects of stimulating cultural identities based on the context surrounding them? And I give you those 4 options for you to reflect on. No need to answer now. How are you feeling about this? And that's okay. May is good. I'd rather, and in general, I'd rather you tell me may, nay, or yay rather than nothing, because at least I know where we are. And then I know if there is something that isn't clear and we can learn a bit more about it rather than say nothing and then we keep on knowing nothing. That's not how you improve. So we're feeling a bit meh. That's good. Then we keep pushing and we're going to try to change that may from yay. Big may. That's all right, Rebecca. We've all been there. Let's go through the theory in order to answer that question and to feel a bit better about it. We said PowerPoint. Thank you very much. Let's start with a little bit. There's many definitions throughout the course. If I'm looking down, it's because I have my notes down. It's not because I'm ignoring you. Starting with the self. How can we define the self? First of all, the self is a very important part of culture, and it's how people see themselves in relations to others. So one's own ideas, images about themselves, and this explains how, why a person behaves. It is part of a concept that you see in Module 1, the cultural worldviews. It's a belief system about yourself and then the culture, the relations around you. This means that the self is dynamic, contextual, multifaceted, and interrelated. It mediates the values of our culture as well. The construction of the self has been explored pretty much and pretty well by Marcus and Kitayama, which is 2 names that have already come up in discourse in Module 1. So the independent, interdependent construction of the self. You might remember this diagram. I was going to say schema. Nope, diagram. So where is my handy laser pointer? There we go. So where we have the independent self over here on the left, and then the interdependent self over here on the right. So we can see that in the independent one, the self in the middle, yes, is connected to other people. You can see the family, the father, the mother, and everyone around, but there is no crossing of the two selves. They remain connected, but they're not bound to each other, which is what you can see on the right with the interdependent. There is crossing over. So it's really the difference between independent being the self standing alone, separate from others, clear boundaries, unique, expressive, all of that good stuff. It's what we learn a lot with what we hear about a lot from more Western cultures. And then the interdependent self is more attached, unclear boundaries. It's the relationships formed with others that are central and an end in themselves rather than the individual on its own. Here, the individual does not exist without the relations around it. Different context where the self is being created at home, with family, restaurants, friends, in public, with strangers. And there's also different domains, dimensions of the self. So physical, how you portray yourself, moral, your values, personal, family, social, so your network, work, academic, ethics, essentially. to remember on this slide, Marcus and Kitayama, this is the second time at least that they come up in this course. And we're not even on halfway through the modules of this course. So it's definitely two names to remember for the exam, and that they are linked to the construction of the self. It's pretty not easygoing, but really their main thing is independent versus interdependent. And then you can play around depending on how it's linked to the self, to just main theory, also the Half-steed dimensions, etc. And of course, to know for the exam, the definition of what the self is. How do we assess the self? How do we test the self? Most of it has been done using the weird concept. So the Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic group on which a lot of the cultural psychology, psychological testing is being done. Is it module one? Yes. Module one also shows a lot of the critique around using this weird sample, that it is mostly Western, English oriented, rather than including the rest of the world inside of those studies. Very importantly, though, is Matsumoto's research. So Matsumoto's research on Japanese and American students was done in order to challenge the idea of using individualism, picking up my mug to put it back down, of using individualism and collectivism as a way to understand culture. So essentially using the idea of independent self and interdependent self to understand the cultures around the people. Before that study, it was the idea that members of individualistic cultures, so independent people, independent selves, would see themselves as separate, unique, autonomous, all that good stuff. And then collectivistic cultures, interdependent selves, would foster the group needs before, with the members, so individual members being fundamentally connected with others. Again, in interdependent selves, in collectivistic cultures, the self only exists through the relations of with others. All of this is built on the one of the dimensions of Half-steeds, one of this, is it six? Yeah, 6 dimensions of Half-steeds that you also need to know for the exam. And it's the cultural value of individualism versus collectivism, and also Marcus and Kitayama's framework of the self. What was the result? That in individualistic cultures, you can have interdependent selves, and that in collectivistic cultures, you can have independent selves. That is essentially different types of self-construction exist in different cultures. It's not because you are in Japan that you can only be interdependent, that you can't be independent. And it's not because you live in the USA that you can't have a collectivistic, interdependent construction of yourself. So it broke down this division between individualism and collectivism, essentially, which is why it's important. Oh, wow. Truly did not add anything to that slide. That's the issues with Matsumoto's research. So while it is an important research, there are a couple of issues with it. Do you need to know those issues? You need to know the research. And if you can tell if it was an open-ended question, and if discussing Matsumoto's research, you can look very smart and add in there, while all this said, there are methodological issues with Matsumoto's research, but it doesn't fully deny the fact that it is a groundbreaking work in studying the self. Yay? I saw a smile. Oh, it warms my heart. Yes, and we're talking about you. Saying two smiles. How is the rest feeling so far? We good? You know what? I'm going to assume it. I haven't seen crying emoji so far. It's good news for me. Linked to the construction of the self, to the idea of the self, is of course self-esteem. Now, self-esteem, which is the cognitive affective evaluation of yourself. And self-esteem can contain three different types, the ones that you can see on the screen: performance, social, and appearance. There are a few studies, early studies, that show that members of individualistic cultures, so independent selves, have higher self-esteem than members from collectivistic cultures. It makes sense because, again, in collectivistic cultures, it is the group that is important, while in individualistic cultures, it's in the name, it's in the individual. So boosting values, boosting qualities is going to be more prominent. You can do this through the neat little trick of self-enhancement. And to give you a very, very basic, simple example, morning affirmations. When you look yourself in the mirror in the morning, like, you know what? Today's a good day. Today I will do all of my work. Today I'm going to have a good coffee. Today I'm going to do my 10K steps. Today I will be the best version of myself. That is self-enhancement. You can do the exact reverse, which is self-effacement. So when you downplay your virtues. Other early studies have also showed that collectivistic cultures tend to self-efface more than individualistic cultures, because again, it is the group, the success of the group that matters rather than your own achievements. So it makes sense to downplay what you're able to do because the group comes first. To give you an idea here, playing football, I'm great at football because I'm just good at whatever I do. But in collectivistic cultures, I'm good at football because my team is also good at football. And together we win the football cup or whatever you win in football. The downplay of the virtues for the group. The better than average effect when you overestimate your abilities. And it's not really, it's going further than self-enhancement. So when it's, for example, pretending that you can do something when really you have no place doing that to begin with. And a mutual self-enhancement is when people give, for example, positive feedback or a compliment, hoping for one in return. I love your dress. Thanks. Your hair looks so good today. Mutual self-enhancement. From the studies on self-esteem, Becker has issued one called the terror management theory, which doesn't sound like it has a lot to do with self-esteem until you see the explanation that self-esteem, for example, is a psychological phenomena that we developed over evolution to deal with our fear of dying. So the self-enhancement trying to get us out of our cave or trying to push us to do more in order to essentially not die. So it's being able to run faster, being able to push harder, being able to travel longer without food, for example. And because of these achievements, then self-esteem is being boosted up and it just keeps on being boosted up. Do we have any questions on the self, on self-esteem? Beautiful. To remember, definition of the self, and then the keywords around self-enhancement, including self-enhancement. So self-effacement, better than average effect, mutual self-enhancement. Terror management theory, I believe, is the first year that it showed up. I don't remember seeing it in the previous years. And it's really a footnote rather than something you absolutely need to know. If you do know it, great stuff. If you don't, it's not the main part of the module. Let's put it this way. Identity. So identity is essentially the concept of who we are. And as a person, we have many identities: personal identity, relational identity, collective identity. Personal identity are the qualities, the attributes that distinguishes me from any of you guys. Relational identity is how we see ourselves in relation to others. So being a daughter, being a student for you, here being a tutor, how we construct ourselves depending on who we are interacting with. And then collective identity ties to the social categories that we belong. For my case, being a French, living in Vienna, all of that good stuff. This course specifically focuses on cultural, ethnic, racial, and national identity. Let's have a little chat on race and ethnicity, which are not real objects, social constructions, just like time, things that we have made up in order to categorize people. They do not have genetical, biological basis. They're literally boxes. Yes, boxes that do not exist, boxes that have been created out of literally nothing and are constituted of nothing, but they still can shape. And through history, we have seen that they do shape a person's life, a person's identity. So while it is important to remember that they don't mean much, they are still important. In particular, the ethnic identity focuses on sharing cultural background, lineage, language, tradition, religion, the interactions between the individual and the society around it. So all of this really comes down to the big statement that identity is fluid and it can change over time. And it also is context dependent. Social identity, so being consciously a member of a social group and adopting the values of this social group. I mentioned, for my case, there's going to be a lot of personal examples. It's kind of sorry, but it's just the easiest. When there is a non-personal example, I would bring it in. But yeah. So in my case, part of my social identity is being a little French in Vienna, while also being part of the Belgian group because I grew up in Belgium. That, however, blah, 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 is when we encounter biculturalism. So when you belong to more than one culture, or you feel that you belong to more than one culture. In my case, I belong to, I'm going to say two, France and Belgium. For you, it can be the Netherlands and something else, can be anywhere in the world where you feel, can also be your religious, so your faith, and then the social group, the other social groups that are around you, the other cultures around you. That can lead to something called identity denial, where an individual, a person, is not recognized as part of a group to which they identify. Personal example again. I was talking with some French who have lived their whole life in France, never left the country except for holiday. And when they spotted my accent in French, because I have a little bit of a Belgian accent hidden in there, like, oh, where was your accent from? Like, you grew up in Belgium. Oh, so you're not a real French. Yeah. Denying the fact that my passport is French, God damn it. But what can I do to change that? What can I do to reinforce the fact that I am French? I can start wearing a beret all the time. I can start changing my accent in English to make it a bit more French so that people have no doubt where I am from. I can just walk around with a baguette all the time. So this is where people start really delving into expressing their identity in more visual ways. Clothing, food, music, to really show, no, I belong to that identity, even if you tell me that I don't belong in it. We see this a lot with people who have suffered from colonialism and trying to get back to the roots of the original culture by trying to tie in this way, trying to not manifest, but trying to make more tangible the identity of belonging. Linked to biculturalism, oh my God, linked to biculturalism, we have cultural frame switching, which is the process of how cultural knowledge is accessed in there. So depending on where you are, you tap in different boxes in your brain, like, all right, I am in the German culture. This is what I need to do in order to not be odd around the German culture. Oh, and I am in Spain, I know of the siesta. I am in Italy, I know of this. I am in the US, I am aware of tipping. All the little different cultural knowledges that you've gathered and that you adapt to which you make references in order to adapt your behavior when you are in that cultural context. Again, a personal example, when I am in France, I talk like a French. When I am in Belgium, I talk like a Belgian. If you are Dutch, you have heard this, you have probably also done it yourself. You speak a certain way in the Netherlands, but when you are in Flanders, in Belgium, you might adapt the way that you speak Dutch because it's not exactly the same Dutch. There's a couple of difference in words. The big study on cultural frame switching is Morris and Peng study from 1994, which was looking at the effects of activating one of the cultural identities based on the context. So there they took bicultural Chinese American students or people, and they wanted to check if, as members of the two societies, if they would attribute behavior more to an individual's personality, which is called dispositional attribution, or if they would attribute behavior to social context, so situational attribution. And it turns out that once again, it's both. They tap in into both. The Morris and Peng study, pretty important, and because it touches on the idea of attribution, which is again linked to the self that we just talked about for example, am I late because of a fault of my own, or am I late because of the environment around me? So here we can actually see that while the module talks about two main, I guess, concepts, self and identity, they are linked in their theory. And it all revolves around the construction, where you put the qualities, the values, where you put the faults, let's put it, of someone. Is it on the individual or is it on the culture around it? Yes, folks, it's the big debate of nature versus why are we but bimping? It's the big debate of nature versus nurture, essentially. Am I the way that I am because I am, or is it the things around me that make me the way that I am? A little module overview, which is literally what we just discussed. So here you can see how everything is linked together. In cultural psychology, the relationship between self and identity, because of course they are linked, one does not exist without the other. It is dynamic, it is culturally shaped, it's an interaction where the self is one's sense of who they are, and it is built upon the social categories and group memberships, which is what identity is. How do we feel? We feel okay? Ah, look at that positive. We're good. Is there anyone that has an issue with anything, has an issue, who wants to fight something in the module that we just went through? If no, then it's time to go back to our exam question. Again, if you want to submit your answers to the question, to me, not in the general chat. Thank you. So let's go back on it. I'll give you a couple of minutes. One more minute and then we'll go through the answers. Alrighty. We're going through the answers one by one so that we understand why the answer that most of you guess is the correct one, but also what are the other ones, because I didn't make any names up. They are all inside of the module. They're all linked to other theories, other concepts. First one, Matsumoto. Matsumoto's research on American and Japanese students, which was in this module. So if you guessed it, you have the right module, you have the wrong name. That was on the assessment of the self, not identity. It was the one challenging using individualism and collectivism to understand culture, where in the end it turned out that, shocking, people can feel individualistic in collectivistic cultures, and then vice versa. People can feel collectivistic in individualistic cultures. It's not because you are in one culture that you necessarily behave that way all the time, that it is part of your core foundation of who you are, which is the self. Candy and Alt, which is in module 11 on social behavior, on how to reduce prejudice. So on whether contact in egalitarian cultures cause a stronger reduction in prejudice, or does it just make it worse? Morris and Pank, which is in module 5 on identity biculturalism. It is the one that studied the cultural frame switching. So with the Chinese American bicultural individuals, see which one they tap in. And then Ekman, which is in module 8 with the basic emotions. And as most of you guessed, it do be C. I suggest we take a little break of 5 minutes. It is currently 04, let's call it 05. So I will see you at 2:10. Does anyone want me to put the WhatsApp QR group back on the screen? All right. Give me a second. Is this? Yes. Here you go. See you in 5. All right. Are we ready to start again? Do I have people back? Hi. How do you say it? Tees? What a good day. I can pronounce everyone's name correctly. Beautiful. Alrighty then. Let's get moving with Module 6, Personality. Starting with a exam question. So same as last time. No need to send me your answers now. We reflect on it. We see how we feel. We move on to theory. And again, it's fighting me. Do the thing. Beautiful. In what way is the Chinese personality assessment inventory an example of combined ethic and emic assessments? And just as last time, how are we feeling? A bit may again. That's fair. May. So many opinions. I love it. Look at everyone's personality shining through just in time. Eva, you don't have to show off. For the ones who are feeling May, let's go through the theory behind the question. What is personality? It's the characteristics, the traits that distinguishes wow, individuals from each other, consistent across time, situations, which is a big difference between personality and mood. A mood is not consistent across time and situation. It varies. The personality is constant. You can have changes in your personality, but not as big as, for example, a mood swing. Personality can be understood through, let's say, two big domains, which are traits and identity. Personality has traits, consistent patterns of behaviors, feelings, thoughts that a person would usually display in relevant circumstances. So, for example, if you guys are meeting a new friend, and then this new friend is, if a friend is presenting you a new friend, that first friend is like, oh, don't worry, Max is very friendly. And so you expect Max to be fun to be around, to have maybe some good jokes, to get along well with other people, to seek the company of other people as well. Personality as identity, it's the perceived roles in life. It's the aggregate role, life experiences, narratives, values, motives, etc. How can we assess, how can we study personality? Through four big main approaches. And that's honestly going to be the rest of this module, going through each of those four approaches, provide examples, etc. The first one being deep psychological anthropology approach, which has as a core concept the fact that each culture has a model, so an ideal type of personality that is shared by most people within that culture. Let's go stereotypical here. The Germans are always on time. The British always drink tea. The Americans are all fat. The French don't know how to speak English and are rude. What else do we have? The Spanish like to sleep. Because it is something that you attach to a culture, a specific culture, anyone coming from that specific culture is supposed to display that personality trait. So it's an emphasis a bit more on learning processes and cultural practices rather than any form of biological factors. And here, personality is seen as culturally specific and influenced by the unique circumstances of each culture. The main example of psychological anthropology is the idea of a national character. What I've just been giving as examples of different personalities based on different countries. Second approach, ethic. Ethic or cross-cultural approach sees personality as a universal phenomenon independent of culture. Personality is something that occurs similarly in every culture. It is something that is measurable, comparable, tangible, that you can pick, poke, study. It's the same everywhere. It allows for an outside perspective. The big example, and we will go through it later on, is the five-factor model, which assumes that they are the same traits, same dimensions throughout every culture in the world. They just show up at different levels to different extremes, depending on where you are in the world, but they are present everywhere. EMIC, or the culturally indigenous perspective, believes that personality and culture are not separate. They influence and shape each other. That personality traits are specific to a particular culture and arise within that cultural context. It rejects any universal theories of personality. So EMIC rejects the five-factor model, for example. There is an emphasis instead that personalities are unique by culture because of this interrelatedness between culture and personality. Is there one better than the other? Is it better to study a culture from outside, the ethic way, or from the inside, the emic way? They both have problems. Ethic has the main issue of having most of the instruments used to analyze a culture from the English language, which can lead to a risk of ethnocentrism, a risk of misunderstanding as well, a risk of hierarching cultures. And because you are comparing, you are trying to compare cultures, so you really focus, you can only focus on so many things when you do comparisons. There is a risk to gloss over, to forget some important details that make a culture unique, or at least a tad bit different. And this is where you create a cultural blind spot. EMIC, on the other hand, because you are out in the field, you are not in the laboratory, there are problems of methodology, in particular when it comes to rigorous methodology. And you can also have something called problems of incremental validity, which is used to determine if a new psychological measure will provide more information than any form of measures that's already in use. So essentially, cool, but is this really new and can we truly use it? Or is this just something that we already have in another form? Because of these issues, because, well, they are both useful, they both have problems, there's that nifty, handy little thing called combined emic ethic, the best of both worlds, which recognizes both universal, ethic, and culture-specific emic aspects of personality. It's basically the main thing is that they don't need to be mutually exclusive. They don't have to be enemies. They can be lovers. They can be friends. They can be complementary. And it makes it possible to study both the common, unique elements of personality across cultures, while also being able to do comparisons. Are we ready to learn more about all of this? Can I get a big yay in the chat? Oh, I got a solid yay in the videos. I love to see it. Oh, yeah. Can I still get a big yay in the chat? Beautiful. Of course, you need to know all of that. Thank you, Alexandra. I would love to see it. You need to know the definition of personality. You need to know the four different approaches. And not only you need to know the names of those different approaches, you need to tell me examples of those four different approaches, why they are important, and also how they differentiate from themselves. Let's start with ethic. The big example that I mentioned being the five-factor model or FFM. Do not take a shot every time I say five-factor. I'm going to say it so many times over the next couple of slides. The five-factor model: openness to experience, consciousness, extraversion, agreeableness or sympathy, and neuroticism. Those are the five distinctive basic dimensions of personality, which apparently are universal. We all got those, folks, aren't we lucky? The five-factor model is a factor analysis. These are the factors. Those are underlying variables that can be measured, that can be sampled, and according to all the studies done, they all show up. It is part of the ethic assumption that across all cultures, everyone sees personality the same, or everyone's personality develops in similar fashion. So it doesn't mean that every culture has the same personality, but there are small cross-cultural differences, but all of those are going to show up in one way or another. And this is an example of the five-factor model. What you see, give me my laser. Oh my God, I can have an arrow. Oh, let's go. I prefer the laser. Over here, the graph. So you can see that we have the five around, and then we have different people that are different, have different levels of neuroticism, different level of openness to experience, conscientiousness, etc. A very handy-dandy way of remembering the five factors, the five variables, is the acronym OCEAN that you can see with the bold letters. This is why those letters are in bold, to make that acronym. So to come back to how this is an example of the ethic approach of personality, because it's used to find similarities between essentially every culture around the world, or most cultures around the world. If you want to look up an example of the five-factor model, you have it in the NEO matrix personality inventory. To remember the five-factor model, what it is, you don't need to know that underlying variables from a large number of observed variables. You need to know that there are factors that can be tested, that can be sampled, that can be analyzed, and those are the factors. And to also tell me, yes, the five-factor model is the big example, at least in this course, for the ethic approach of studying personality. Moving on a bit further with factor analysis. So when you identify a small number of variables, factors, and psycholexical research, really testing my capacity to read and to pronounce, we have the five-factor theory. The five-factor theory, to not mistake for the five-factor model, believes that we are born with biological basic tendencies, which are the big fives that are still on the screen. This is why they're still there, because while the five-factor theory and the five-factor model are not the same, they're related. So we are all born with those big fives, but then characteristic adaptations, cultural adaptation, cultural differences will come up. And this is shown in attitudes, skills, relationships, assumed roles, etc. These adaptations, these cultural differences, I just said it, influenced by culture. And ultimately, from these differences come our self-image. So we'll go back to module 5 on the construction of the self. Behaviors, cognitions, motivations, values, all of that good stuff. The difference between the theory and the model is the set of traits that are universal in people personalities. So the set of traits is, of course, ocean. So it's the 5 factors. The theory, the 5-factor theory, is a theoretical framework aimed at finding the root cause, the why, behind those big 5 traits. Because it wasn't complicated enough, guess what? There's a third one, the evolutionary theory, which understands personality as a universal understanding of human interest through natural selection and adaptation to the environment. Hello, Darwin. So personality traits should be adaptive to the environment. To give you an example, some people are a bit more neurotic or a bit more anxious, but that allows them to be maybe a bit more fluid in their social ties, in their social relationships. It can help a person avoid certain situations or get closer to other relations that are important to their development of personality and of the self. The difference. The difference between the 5-factor theory and the evolutionary theory, I can't say theory now because they're both theories. The 5-factor theory describes what personality is. Evolutionary theory explains, come on paper, why and how personality, including ocean, including the big 5 from the 5-factor model, developed through natural selection. So again, why? How? Well, not why. What, how, and why. Clear? A little jazz hands there. Any questions on 5-factor model theory, 5-factor theory, evolutionary theory? You could do a drinking game on this. Jesus Christ. Or we can move on to MH. We're good to move on? I'm going to take that as a yes. You need to know both. So EMIC, when you study a culture from inside of the culture, rather than looking at it from the outside, the universal ethic approach where you look at it from a lab, here we go out in the field and we study the culture from the inside. The main examples in the book, in the course, and in today's training of the EMIC approach is for example, Jahoda's Ashanti personality, which is the tradition of having the birth weekday determining character. I had the privilege to actually discuss this in Ghana with people who are very familiar with this tradition. It's real. So for example, I think I was born on a Monday. My middle name, if I was in that culture, would have been Monday, and I would have been expected to behave according to the values given to the day Monday. Calm, peaceful. If you were born on Wednesday, you are supposed to be more aggressive, a bit more moody. Maybe Thursday is a bit more joyful, a bit more childlike in the way that they behave, and maybe Friday just really likes a cup of tea and reading by the fire. The values of the day that you're born in determines aspects of your personality. In a way, it is, yes, reflections of stereotype. and also some internalized expectations that, oh, my child was born on Tuesday, therefore I expect my child to behave this way. And when the child doesn't behave the way that Tuesday behaves, then there can be some conflicts, for example. And this is where you also see the sociological principle of self-fulfilling prophecy. So because you have put something out, you are realizing it. And something that is a lot more dealt in the sociology course, cultural sociology course. The second example is the African Ubuntu personality, which states that a person is a person only through the relationships that they have with others. So a person's personality consists of several layers: family, community, ancestry. But we can see that all together, even if there are several layers, there is one thing overarching those layers: kinship. So the very close proximity of bond. You need to be able to find the good in your community. And when you find the good in your community, only then can you find the good in yourself. So it's the extreme of interdependent construction of the self that we saw with Kitayama. That here, not only are the boundaries unclear, there ain't no boundaries. Boundaries are gone. We don't know the word anymore. You are only yourself through the relationship, through the kinship that you have with others. The Japanese amae relationship style, which is a form of passive dependence coming from the relationship between a mother and a child. So in adult relationships in Japan, amae is manifested by a silent expectations of care, support from others without explicit request. And the others here tend to be the motherly figures. And this dependence formed the basis of many other relationships because you implicitly, passively depend on your relationship with the mother. This will form the basis of other relationships. Those three personality aspects, personality types, are unique geographically and culturally uh, to these cultures. And the only way to find this is again by studying the culture from inside of the culture. If you just look at West Africa in a glimpse, it's very hard to pinpoint Ashanti personality because it's not present in all of West Africa. I found it in Ghana. It's not there in Senegal when they are in the same part of the African continent. The same way that if you study Asia as a whole, maybe the Amai relationship style does not come up because it is specific to Japan, maybe not so much Korea, Thailand, China. Where do we even begin with China, etc.? Gonna come as a shock. You need to know also. You don't necessarily need to, just as I did for the three, provide examples, but you need to understand why they are examples of emic approach. And therefore, you need to know what emic approach is. Rotor and locus of control. So how much control a person in the environment. Internal locus of control means that you attribute everything as a consequence of your own behavior. External locus of control is where you attribute everything independently of yourself and you put the blame or you put the success of something happening outside of you, like on the outside. Examples for you. We're not putting this forward though. I did not get the grade I wanted on cultural psychology course. I haven't studied enough. Internal locus of control, default, I put default on me. External locus of control, I did not get the grade I wanted for cultural psychology. Roxanne was just not good. I didn't get anything from her teaching. I put default on something outside of me. I put it on Roxanne. That's weird. I put it on. Anyways, you get my point. This is where again we see in module 5 when we were discussing self-enhancement, self-effacement, the self-esteem. You can see here again when you boost your values or you downplay your virtues. It's linked to the locus of control. How are we doing? We good? Oh, hold on. I'm reading your message, Eva. Oh, if I gave the impression that either of these are wrong, that is not at all what I meant. None of these are, there is no question of right or wrong here. There is no question of one being better than the other. This is just traits of personality studied across the world. There is no hierarchy. There is no, well, this one is a better way to understand personality than the others. They exist in the world. People who like to go out in the world have witnessed that and have come up to the idea of the way that this is done in that culture is pretty unique in there. Now, you can also see it in other cultures. I mean, you're saying it like to different the self from others, you must look at the other. Yes, but it is maybe pushed a bit more to the extreme in the Ubuntu context. Not to be philosophical. Girl, I just said like a couple of minutes ago that time is a social construct. Philosophy is all around us. Does what I say make sense in relation to your message? Beautiful. A lot of text incoming. So we saw when we have universal and then when we have culture specific, let's see examples of when we merge the two, where we have the best of both worlds. So the integration of cultural specificity and the methodological rigor and universalism of ethic. First example, the Chinese personality assessment inventory, which I believe has been renamed to cross-cultural personality assessment inventory. It is a mouthful. We're going to go through the three inventories step by step to show how they are both emic and etic. The CPAI has two approaches, the first one being emic, so culture specific, because it was developed specifically for Chinese culture. How so? There was an examination of how Chinese people describe themselves using Chinese books, proverbs, interviews in Mandarin, Cantonese, or whatever Chinese dialect that they use. And from all of this, four factors were derived, factors that did not seem to appear in the big five, so ocean of the five-factor model: social potency, dependence, leniency, interpersonal connectedness. Interpersonal connectedness is the one that you need to know for CPAI, because it's the one that was really found to be unique and not appearing in the big five. The others, you could find ways to link it back to the big five, not in interpersonal connectedness. Oof, I will manage to say it. Which means what? We have a cultural blind spot. We have a cultural blind spot in Western personality models that does not include something that has proven to exist. Second approach, ethic rather. Ethics are universal because they took those four new factors that they found, including interpersonal connectedness, and so if that could be applied if they appeared in other non-Chinese cultures. So we're doing comparison work, and as soon as we're doing comparison, it'd be ethic, baby. And through this comparison, the factor of interpersonal connectedness was found in European and American societies, meaning that that dimension, that factor, that variable is not exclusively Chinese. Do you need to know all the details? You need to know the two different approaches in the inventory that leads it to be a combined emic ethic. Same for the South African personality inventory, SAPI. It's a long history behind the SAPI. It's a long history connected to the aftermath of the apartheid. Gonna go through it very quickly. You don't necessarily need to know the whole background, historical background of the SAPI, but you need to know again why it's in which way it's ethic, which way it's emic, and therefore which way it's combined approach. So in the 90s, after the apartheid, there was a lot of emphasis on equality. And one of this emphasis on equality was manifested through psychological tests, essentially. And most tests were based on the weird sample, weird research, so Western, educated, rich, industrialized, democratic. And so a new test was needed for the people of South Africa, for the new society of South Africa post-apartheid. And this was really one of the main goals of the SAPI project rather, to develop an indigenous theoretical model of personality. Do I not have? Oh my God, there we go. And to develop a personality test that is not biased towards a particular language, for example, English, or ethnic groups in South Africa, because it is a very diverse society. So it was developed in 3 phases. The first phase, emic in essence, the culturally specific phase, which again, we have interviews, participants describing themselves, and others as well in certain context, all of this done using 11 languages, some without dictionaries. And from this, just like the CPAI, 3 new traits, 3 new variables, 3 new factors were found. Surprise, surprise. These are facilitation relief, so guiding others, integrity, honesty, reliability, loyalty, all that good stuff, and then relationship harmony, which can be seen as approachability, accessibility. The second phase of the SAPI was an instrument development phase. So items were developed to test the clusters, and it had to be consistent in meaning across cultures, languages in South Africa. So here we have essentially an analysis of consistency of behavior, of traitedness, so the different traits that have been found, how often they come up in the South African societies. And then finally, combined emic ethic phase for the purpose of establishing validity in different contexts. While 2 of the new models, the 2 of the new factors suggested to be universal, that is conscientiousness and emotional stability. But then facilitation or relief did not seem to appear in other cultures. So in a way, you could say that out of those 3, just like interpersonal connectedness in China, facilitation appears to be unique in South Africa, to South Africa. How do we know this? Because again, we've done comparison along the way. So universal approach, therefore ethic. And the final example for this, the Arab Personality Inventory, API. API, worked up my transitions here. The API had 2 studies, one qualitative, one quantitative. Study 1 of a qualitative nature was a study of personality of descriptions among Arab countries. And here, just like the other 2 examples, we have an emergence of 9 new personality dimensions. Study 2 of a quantitative nature warped to an indigenous personality inventory from which came 7 dimensions, 5 of them already being present in the 5-factor model. So we have 2 new. dimensions, to new factors, to new variables of personality. Just like the SEPI, there was a problem of language. Remember that the SEPI had 11 languages. The API had seven, nope, three, at least three languages. And so it was difficult to develop one personality instrument where everything has the same meaning. And so this is where you see the combined nature of the API, where they used dictionary for characteristics, which is ethic, but they also had additional measurements for validation, so removal of redundant words. So when you zoom in a little bit more in the interviews. So again, you go inside of the interview, you study the interview on its own. That is more of an emic approach. I need to work on how I say things because I realize I always finish high on my sentences. It's not good. It's not good. Are these clear? Are these clear why they are all combined emic ethic approach? And do we have any questions on any of these? And to go back to your message, to your previous message, Eva, again, not one inventory is better than the others. They are instruments. That's all that is. If there are no questions, so is that whole module then good to use? Are all trait dimensions, identity, personality, are all personality traits valid? Or just the way that Eva pointed out, is there one more maybe superior than the other, one better way to study? They all, in a way, have a biological universal basis. Humans be humans at the end of the day. But while you can't deny biology, culture very much is a factor that you cannot deny. You cannot deny the nurture aspect of personality development. Nature is a thing, but it goes hand in hand with nurture. So really, we've done all of this to come to the conclusion that personality is potentially, maybe, perhaps, more of a descriptive label rather than a fixed concept. Because again, it do be flexible, it changes depending on the cultural context, etc. So yes, personality traits such as the Big Five, the five-factor model, can provide insight into how a person tends to behave, bearing in mind the context around that person. And then though the emic ethic approaches nicely complement each other, personality here is more of a tool for description rather than a universal predictor of behavior. Think of it as the stars. I'm a Scorpio myself. Yeah, it's cool to know that according to the cluster of things above our head, I'm a Scorpio. Does that define everything does that define everything that I do? Or everything that I do, people go, classic Scorpio. No, it's a fun thing to have. If it's a fun thing to reference from time to time, it's a label. And then that's it. And it's the same with personality and the factors around it. Important for the exam, for your revisions, that in summary part on the slide. So if we look at the module overview, it's pretty simple, sorry, because that module, I feel module 6 has a bit more big self and then identity, while module 6 is really just personality, and more than personality, it's really going one by one in the assessment methods. Looking at this, reflecting on the module we've just been through, do we have any questions, any concerns, any notes? before we move back on to the exam question? No questions? Beautiful. Then let's get through that practice question again. So in what way is the Chinese personality assessment inventory an example of combined ethic and emic assessments? What we've just been through. You send me your answers to me. You have 1 more minute. Was this one harder? Because I had I think I had every answer in the chat. Are they too hard? Am I mean? Because I'm the one who comes up with these. Are they mean? Ish? No. Thank you, Simran. How kind. Let's go through the answers. And it doesn't work. There we go. Beautiful. Answer A. Cultural blind spot found in Western personality models. So going back through the theory, the CPAI is an examination of Chinese people describing themselves using Chinese books, Chinese languages, proverbs, interviews. And from this, we have new factors that were derived. Of these factors, one was found to be unique. How do we know this? 4 factors were developed through an emic approach, again, the interviews, proverbs, so qualitative type of study. But then they were tested onto other cultures, ethic, trying to find a more universal method, or not method, framework. And it turned out that only one of them, interpersonal connectedness, appeared. But it didn't appear in the other model. For example, in the 5-factor model, it's not part of ocean, which means that you could call it a cultural blind spot because it didn't exist before, and it showed that it exists. It exists in European societies, it exists in American societies, but it is not recognized. Cultural blind spot, very simply put. Answer B, interpersonal connectedness is not an exclusively Chinese personality trait. What we just said, that the four traits that were found out to be through studying the Chinese culture were then tested in other cultures, and interpersonal connectedness came out as existing in the other cultures. So no, it's not exclusively a Chinese personality trait. It exists again in European, American, probably also African uh, personality societies. And this is where you really see the advantage of ethic and emic, because you have something unique, you found something unique to a culture, but then through comparing it with other cultures, other societies, other personality models, you can find out, wait, is it actually unique, or do I already have it under another name? Wait, for B, it should be an ethic approach. Yes. You know, the entire time I was thinking, I haven't done a single typo in my slides. I'm doing so much better than before. Right at the end, dang it. I'll change it for when the slides will be distributed so that you don't have to go insane on your own. Thank you for pointing it out, Maud. Both? None? The answer is, of course, both. For the ones who sent me other answers, did you do so because of my typo? If not, is it now clear why it's answer C? The logic of getting to answer C. Yeah? Beautiful. I believe you do. I will, however, there we go. I will ask Eva, and then I'll put it on the free training session WhatsApp group, so not you guys as the big group. Are we good for that question? All right. How are we feeling now compared to when we started an hour and a half ago? We're feeling a bit better about ourselves, about the topic? That was a confident nod. I love to see it. If you guys feel better, I would love, and I even get a thumbs up. Beauty freaking full. If you feel more confident, if you like the way that I taught, if you liked the interactions that we had today, I would love to hear from you through the feedback form. You can let me know your thoughts. You can also grade me. You can leave me a little note. You can tell me if you like my plant behind me that's been giving me bunny ears. I know it's beautiful, right? It's huge. I need to repot it. If you have a bit more time, like 10 minutes, I have a couple more practice exam questions that we can go through. I'll just give everyone 2 minutes to fill the feedback form in. I'm going to have a little bit of a sippy sippy. I feel parched. And for the ones who don't have 10 more minutes, it was an absolute pleasure. I hope to see you for the free training, if not, on the WhatsApp group. I'll give 1 more minute. And then for the ones who can spare a few more minutes with me, we'll go through a couple more questions. Same style as the last one, covering the two modules. All right. Why? Man. Let's go through some more and then a usual debrief. Peptide's dimensions are one of the core theories in cultural psychology, and most importantly, one of the core theories of this course. And so, hint, hint, do know that and do know his dimensions. How does it contribute to the study of the self? You can send me your answers to me directly. One more minute. Let's go through it. It's so close to the top. Answer A. The IBM study is of an emic nature, attempting to find out specific personality traits. Sure. How is it relevant to the construction of the self, though? Yeah, it can be an example of emic ethic approach study. And even then, there's like ecological problems when saying this, and that's a big thing of the IBM study. There is a problem of ecological validity. But the main issue with this answer is, how does it contribute to the study of the self? How does this answer the question? It doesn't have nothing to do with it. B, it defines masculine, feminine characteristics of the self, which, yes, is a cultural value, a cultural dimension of Hofstede, but again, has no connection to the construction of the self, according to this course and according to Module 5. Hofstede developed cultural values. It literally means nothing. Sure, but which ones? And again, how does that contribute? We always go back to the question, how does it contribute to the study of the self? How does this framework work for this? It doesn't. It, one of it contributes to it, but not the whole framework. because it is linked to the individualism, collectivism of the self. Let's remember Marcus and Kitayama's independent, interdependent of the self, or individualism, collectivism. It's one, this question shows two things. Numero uno, you can't have a good house if your foundations are crumbling. Yes, you need to know the name of Hofstede, but you also need to know how that is linked to all the rest. You really need to be able to map out in your mind on a piece of paper a network, spider web of all the different concepts, studies, because they're all linked together. You have foundation studies, just like Hofstede's dimension, on which others are built on top, whether it's for criticism or additional information. Second thing that this question shows, if you don't know the answer from the get-go, that's all right. You can do the fun thing of not this one, not this one, not this one. By elimination, it is D. When in doubt, eliminate. Most of you guessed D for the ones that didn't. Is it clear why it is? Beautiful. Next one, and I believe it's the last one. In the study of personality, what is the difference between the five-factor theory and the evolutionary theory? We're essentially all geniuses. My work is done. I'm so proud of myself. One more minute. Time to go through it, even though, again, all freaking geniuses. I should not be even be explaining because you already all know. Beautiful to see. So the difference, five-factor theory, evolutionary theory, so around the five-factor model. Five-factor theory, I need to find an acronym because I'm tired of saying it all the time, refers to what personality is. Evolutionary theory is about why and how personality develops. Indeed, the first one, theoretical framework, looking for the root cause of personality traits, so the big five. The second one, why and how personality developed through natural selection. Número dos, the evolutionary theory defines the traits of personality. The five-factor theory discusses the personality progression. If you are a keen reader, you will have noticed that I have more than one trick in my bag. That is the flipped version of A. So it is the other way around. Five-factor theory is why, evolutionary theory is how. There are both sets of traits that are universal in people's personality. No, they are frameworks. They are theories around the set of traits, which is the five-factor model. One is more of an ethic approach, the other is of an emic approach. Again, because we are working around the five-factor model, which is ethic, universal, both are universal frameworks. And so well done, everyone. What a nice way to finish today. Everyone getting it right. Beautiful. As a roundup, I would love to see, I think the first one is on Saturday, I think, to go through the full course where we go like today, things by things, but way more developed concept by concept, theory, study, module by module, and we're looking to build those foundations for a very strong house. Before we wrap up, any questions? Nope. Then thank you. For the ones, thank you for coming. Thank you for participating. If I don't see you in the full training, I wish you the best of luck. If you have any questions that haven't been answered today, if you ask me anything, I will put it on the WhatsApp group. You put it on the WhatsApp group, and I will see you there. Have a lovely rest of your afternoon and a lovely rest of your week. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Bye.